Welcome to the Too Old or Pure Gold Movie Podcast. In today's episode, we're discussing the 1985 comedy European Vacation. The format of our podcast, two Gen Xers rewatch beloved movies from our youth to find out, are they really as good as we remember? To help us debate and ultimately pass judgment, we ask our millennial co-hosts to watch these movies for the first time and help us determine, are they too old or pure gold? I'm your host, Olen Vanderleeden, representing Gen X. And today we're very excited to have a special guest host representing Gen X today, Mark Wolters. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Olen. Glad to be here and representing our generation.
And before I introduce our millennial co-host, I just want to properly introduce Mark to our listeners. For those of you that don't know him, Mark Wolters is an award-winning travel vlogger and the host of Wolters World YouTube travel channel that has over 270 million views. Wow, we aspire to that, Mark. And 1.1 million subscribers. I know Mark because he's been my go-to travel advice guy for over 10 years. That is the truth. And I'm the weirdo that sends you random tweets and says, "Guess where I am?" Anyhow.
Oh yeah.
So I'm confident we have the right guy to help us unravel National Lampoon's European Vacation. Mark is also an associate professor of business administration at the University of Illinois. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
And this isn't an interview format podcast, but I do have a couple of travel questions for you, but I'm going to push them to the end. So everybody should stick to the end of this episode to hear those. Representing the millennials today, we have regular co-host Sean. Welcome, Sean.
Hello.
And we also have with us today our regular dog acting expert, Anthony, and he's also our Chevy Chase critic for this episode.
Good morning, guys.
Today's movie is the 1985 vacation sequel, National Lampoon's European Vacation, starring Chevy Chase and Beverly D'Angelo. The movie is directed by Amy Heckerling. This is the same director who did Fast Times at Ridgemont High, so she should know comedy. The tagline from the movie poster is, "For over 200 years, Europe has survived many disasters. Now for the real test. Chevy Chase and his family are coming from America." And we complain a lot about shitty taglines, but honestly, this one is not only bad, but it breaks character. Why are they saying Chevy Chase and not Clark Griswold?
I know. I agree with that one because Griswold was the character. I mean, I know he's the character, but Griswold, the Griswolds have become something. But I wonder at the time when it was released, if it wasn't just that Griswolds hadn't become what they are today. Like now you have people that like put, "We're the Griswolds, come see our Christmas lights" kind of stuff. So could have been that. He was still a high flying star then. So
yeah, I think he was bigger in name than the Vacation franchise at this point, but maybe that's it.
For sure.
Still, it's lazy. And speaking of lazy writing, IMDb describes this movie as the Griswolds win a vacation tour across Europe where the usual havoc ensues. Accurate. But so for those of you that have not seen the movie, I asked my 93-year-old dad to watch European Vacation and summarize the plot.
The European Vacation begins with the Griswold family. You see them in a ridiculous outfit, and they went an all-expense-paid European trip, and the first stop is London. So they rent a car, and of course they go wrong side of the road, and they go to Stonehenge, and they back up. Unfortunately, they hit one of the monolith, and it topples, and all the others go except one. And then they go to Paris. In Paris, Clark's camera was stolen, and he had an embarrassing picture of Ellen on that. On the Eiffel Tower, Rusty says, "I don't want to wear these funny berets." And so Dad says, "Okay." And he threw it out. And the people right beside him had a chihuahua. And the dog enthusiastically jumps after it. So he goes way down, ends up in the pool. So funny. At least I think so. And then there's a body can show. And Clark, of course, enjoys it. Then on to Germany. They have the wrong number, but they didn't know that. And they go right in. The couple is just bewildered. They are hospitable. They look after them, and they even provided a bed for them. That's sort of nice, cute. Then after that, Clark managed to get the lederhosen, and he looks ridiculous, and he runs around in the wrong way, of course, and now the other dancers get furious. They chase him out of town onto Rome. They rent a car there, but they don't know that the manager is locked in the trunk. Ellen sees that embarrassing poster. She's really crying and mad at Clark, and she goes back to the hotel, and a thief, and he tries to get the key to the car from her purse. They make all kinds of mistakes. Everybody laughs or is supposed to laugh. They make it safely home, and that is the end of this comedy.
He was not a fan of this movie. I'll say that.
Shocker.
Shocker. But he watches every one of them. I've even had my dad watch Porky's, Mark, and he's a good.
I'm sure he enjoyed it. Come on, took him back to the day, back in the day.
Okay, so let's quickly have an overall reaction to this movie before we get into the discussion. What did you guys think of it? Mark, you're the guest.
Yeah.
Go for it.
Go, Mark, please.
So I had not watched this in probably 10 years. And being a travel expert, people always like, oh, what about the movies? What about the movies? I will say a lot, like if I look at this like a travel person, it actually, a lot of the stuff still holds up, which is pretty funny. You could definitely tell some of the dated references that are in there. That's for sure. But I think
Traveler's
as a
Checks?
movie, like, what?
Like Traveler's Checks?
Yeah, like Traveler's Checks. Like, what's that? But overall, I still thought it was a pretty funny movie. Definitely was better than I remembered it. Because now everyone watches Christmas Vacation. That becomes a default one now. I'm like, actually, it was pretty good. I was glad I watched it. My Gen Z son, he thought it was kind of funny too. But he was like, oh, there were some parts there. He was a little like, oh my. But he's 13, so you can guess those parts.
Well, I have some comments from our regular Gen Z as well who couldn't be here today. But so my reaction to this, it is completely predictable gags. So I haven't seen this movie in 40 years. And as I was watching it, I'm like, here's what's going to happen next. Actually, I was watching it with my wife and said, can you predict what's going to happen? And she got it right every time, obviously. Completely predictable gags, but in a fun way. So first half of the movie, I was actually laughing hard. And Mark, I measure comedies by do I laugh out loud? And I had a number of laugh out loud moments in the first half of this movie. By the second half of the movie, I kind of felt it got a little bit tired, like it was dragging out a bit. But I actually enjoyed myself watching this. I mean, I think it was not a bad way to spend 100 minutes.
Yeah. I mean, I would definitely say it's like most movies. The first half, when they just do the humor before they feel like they have to get to like, oh, we have to have some problem we solve. They can throw something in. You're like, man, that first act, even mostly through the second act, was still pretty good. And then it's like the whole kidnapping drama and all that. You're like, did we really need that? Or we could just make more silliness. But you gotta have some kind of third act, kind of like big payoff. So, but overall, I'm with you, Olen.
I'm gonna guess it was the collaboration with Eric Idle that made that first half really good. But we'll get into that. Let's hear from the millennials what you thought of this movie.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. Honestly, it's my first Chevy Chase movie that I've ever sat down and watched. So, like National Lampoon kind of thing.
Well, that qualifies you to be a critic.
Yeah, no, he was not my favorite part of the movie. I liked Beverly D'Angelo. I thought she was a smoke show and great piece of the movie. The kids were funny. I love the scenery. Again, I agree with Mark. Just didn't really need that heist kind of kidnapping part. Kept to an 80-minute movie, I would have liked it a lot more.
Sean, what did you think?
It's a movie that, like a lot of comedies from this era, I feel like it was a bit slow and dragged, but there's some really funny moments in the middle at different points as individual gags. There's some good stuff.
Okay. Great. Nicole is our regular Gen Z person, and she enjoyed a lot of it. There was a couple of parts she thought were hilarious, but overall, I think she would give it kind of a meh. Okay, so this is the second film in the series, and I just want to quickly ask our millennials, you guys, are you familiar with this franchise? Have you watched many of the movies in the franchise?
I'm not familiar at all.
I'm familiar. I've heard about it, but I've never really been into that kind of humor, so I never got into it.
Heard of it? I don't even think I've come across
It's National Lampoon, right?
Yeah, National Lampoon. So
Yeah.
I think Vacation is very well known. Christmas Vacation is a staple for people. There's a ton of people who watch. Sean's shaking his head. There's a ton of people that watch Christmas Vacation. Kind of my favorite. I really like Vegas Vacation. Super fun. Anyhow, so this is the whole National Lampoon thing, which I thought was interesting. National Lampoon started as an American humor magazine in 1969. I do not know how they got into doing movies, but they're known for, I'm going to say,
Animal House is the big one.
right. I'm saying they got 7 movies from the original heyday, which was Animal House, Vacation, European Vacation, Christmas Vacation. Those are the ones they're really known for. But Mark, you're obviously familiar with National Lampoon's Vacation. What's interesting is the magazine ceased in 1998, and it's National Lampoon has been limping along, but they've actually done 75 other movies. And
72
Really?
of them involving Chevy Chase.
I think Chevy Chase wishes he everywhere.
and I highlighted just a couple of titles to tell you guys. These might be lesser known ones. Disco Beaver from Outer Space.
I think I've seen that one.
This one I have not
Up all night.
This one I've not seen, but I might look it up. National Lampoon's Boobies from 2005. So they're digging deep for the humor. And Dracula's Daughter versus the Space Brains in 2010 seems like it might be good.
Are you sure these are
Anyhow.
movies?
Are these direct to Netflix specials?
Adult filtered features.
It sounds like one of the continuations of the American Pie sequels. They just keep adding on later.
I know it gets pretty sad. Okay, so the first question I have is about the movie poster. Did you guys get a look at the movie poster for this? I think it's a great movie poster. I can see Mark's looking it up right now. I think it's a great movie poster, and I think that might have been what enticed these guys to do this film. Just the way they're all depicted in the movie. They're looking all muscular and hot. It's fantastic.
Well, you got to know how to make the actors feel like they want to be a part of it.
Yeah. Well, it is interesting. The franchise, I think, has some strength now, but I don't think this was a strong follow up to Vacation. I think
Does it have some strength now? Does it exist still? Is this a thing?
I don't think it is, because what's happened over time is like the original Vacation was a hit, and then they had this one like as a meh, but then the Christmas Vacation was popular, but over the years, it's kind of like A Christmas Story, how over the years of showing up, it became a famous movie, and like A Wonderful Life, which was a completely garbage movie back when it first came out, and then over the years became something bigger than it actually was at the time. And this is one of the ones that Christmas Vacation has actually surpassed the original Vacation. But European Vacation, it's a fine movie. It's not like a disappointment. Like if you ever see one, and I recommend you never ever watch this, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation 2, possibly one of the worst movies ever made. Like ever.
I noted that.
We'll have to get you back on for that one, Mark.
We'll be well into this podcast before we have to dig that deep.
I'll burn the computer. You type that in, I'm gonna burn it. That's that bad.
Yeah.
Like it's not even so bad. You're like, oh, that was so bad. It was funny. Now it's just bad.
Okay, so I actually kind of love the old school slapstick humor, you know, that this film, this era of films really has. So I just noted places where I laughed out loud when they were having the dreams on the plane. They were all dreaming of their life. The sound of Griswold based on The Sound of Music. I laughed out loud. That was the best. The rest of them not so good. I love all of when the cabbie. When they're getting out of the cab and they keep hitting him in the nuts with the luggage and knocking him over.
So 80s. That was like go-to humor
so
there.
80s. The idea, Mark, you can confirm this for us from having visited London several times. I know every channel in the UK is about cheese.
For me, it's more the documentary style. Like literally, if you don't have it, if you just get like BBC One, BBC Two, BBC Three, ITV, like it does have that. Like, oh yeah, when you go through, there's only like a few channels, and there's definitely going to be some kind of documentary kind of thing. It could be cheese. It could be about the bacon of whatever. But yeah, like I laughed at that one just like an inside joke because I was in Chester a couple of years ago, and it literally like they only had 3 channels, and it was like that kind of stuff. And I just laughed because the bathroom was also down the hall.
Oh, yeah, hilarious! And the whole scene when she's in the bathtub and then the stranger comes in and
yeah, Robbie Coltrane. Like, did you see that? I was
Yeah.
like, oh, it's Robbie Coltrane.
I did.
Like,
I did.
It's like there's your for Hagrid for my millennials. So it's the Hagrid.
Okay.
He was always been a big dude, but like it's kind of funny.
Okay, so Mark, since we have a travel expert on the show, a couple questions for you. Are French people really that rude, and are British people really that nice?
So British people really are that nice, which is pretty funny. I mean, obviously it's a little extreme, but it is one of those like, oh, I'm so sorry. Did I actually, bruise your car when I fell on it when you ran over me? I'm so sorry. Like they are pretty nice, though. I think the Irish are probably funnier with it than the English, but yeah, they are pretty sweet like that. I will say the waiter in Paris. No, the people in France are not like that. People in Paris aren't like that, but the waiters at tourist sites, they get so overrun with tourists that I could see some of those things happening, especially like when you've got 9,000 tourists overrunning you. So I could see that happening, but especially when he's like, oh, you are a typical American, and he says the A word. I don't know how PG-13 you are, but
Rip
like
it
that was
out.
one of the ones
Oh,
that
no.
I kind of chuckled.
Well, this is we're in the explicit category. You can say what you want because our usual Gen X co-host has a bit of a potty mouth.
Well, luckily Sean and Anthony are such good boys.
We are. Yeah, I love that French waiter scene. That reminded me more. I haven't been to France, but I would think it's more like the Quebec kind of French waiters.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. That would go a little bit more. You're right. You're right.
Yeah, and generally, what were your thoughts on the depiction of London, Paris, Rome?
So honestly, the places they went still look almost exactly the same. I'm like, oh, Termini Station still looks as crappy as it did then. Just new. It just has fancier advertisements now. But honestly, like the going around the kind of stuff. I mean, it's definitely not as multicultural as it is now. Like they didn't have that depicted. Where it is now, it's much more multicultural. But when you go like this stuff, I was like, yeah, that was actually kind of like how it is. That's why I always laugh at people like, what's changed in Rome? I'm like, not much in the last 2,000 years.
Yeah.
And so it did fit. But I did crack me up with some of the stuff. It's like, yeah, that's kind of how it is. The stealing of the camera. I'm like, that's a typical one. To this day, people get their phones stolen all the time, and that's why you need to have your protection on there because you don't want to find your videos online.
Yeah, yeah, I did have a thought, which is that scene made me laugh, especially the part where he had his wife's dirty video on it, and it got stolen, and it ended up being a movie. And I thought, that's kind of a premonition of OnlyFans, maybe.
Exactly. And the thing is, like, if you were going to see like Italian and French movies back in the day, sometimes it looked like about that high quality of filming kind of stuff. Sometimes.
That is hilarious. Yeah. And back before we had the internet, when getting some good footage like that was a find. Well,
except in Germany, Germans always been weird. Like that was one.
Oh, that was a hilarious.
South Park wasn't wrong about the Germans.
How likely is that you can show up to the wrong house, not speak the language, and the people just let you in?
Oh,
Yeah, I think that was probably the biggest stretch because the Germans were like, "Get the hell out of my house."
Well, I'll tell you, I'll spoil some of the trivia. That was based on a true story.
Oh, yeah.
Really?
That happened to one of the writers. Maybe not. Maybe I'm sure it was exaggerated, but that happened to one of the writers, and so that's why they put it in.
I will say I've met people that invited me into their house and we drank and ate and stayed there. But like now I just come up like, hey, and walk in kind of stuff and hug them.
It makes me want to try it.
well,
I mean, it's probably more reliable than Airbnb. Just knock on a door.
it wasn't that extreme.
Less
but
cameras.
I will always remember. So my in Victoria, BC, here, my eldest brother used to live downtown, and I visited him for lunch one workday, and some lady knocked on the door. We open up the door, and she just comes in with like 3 bags of suitcases into the house and starts setting up. And we're quite literally like, what are you doing? What are you doing? And no. And she's like, hotel, I'm here for the hotel. And we kind of like look out the door where you can see the hotel sign across the street. And we're like, are you looking for that building? So
How did you get in this building?
Yeah, it's
That's
hilarious.
how I think that's how Taken 5 starts.
Well, I'll tell you, for me, what I think has changed with travel like this since the '80s is that travel was so exotic in the '80s. At least it was to me. I don't actually my kids are off to Europe when they're 19, and some of my kids are off to Europe when they're 19 and traveling, and it's, I think, common. Most people I know are taking trips to Europe on occasion and starting to see the world. But back in the 80s, when I was a kid and when this movie came out, I didn't know anybody that went to Europe, and if I did, it was only the parents. The kids never went. Like, travel was exotic back then.
Oh yeah, I mean that was one thing I saw. Like I was like watch when they got all excited for winning a European trip, and like now you do it like that, it's no big deal. Like my kids have been, I don't know, dozens of times, and we travel all the time. It's like, but I think back to, I'm like, shoot, when I first started traveling, like in the '90s by myself, my tickets to Europe were more expensive then than they are now. You know, and I'm like, and that's 30 years of inflation, all this stuff, but the plane tickets are lower now. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, it was something super, super exotic. Like, you've been to Europe? You went to London? Oh my God. Did you see the Queen? I'm like, no, I did not see the Queen. I still changed the guard.
Not the one in this movie. Not the one in this movie, anyhow.
Yeah, this I love that the Princess Diana and Prince Charles little, like she's like having the dreams, because that's actually a thing. Like people will not contact me. They're like, I have my dream of going to Europe. I'm going to have these things, and like Rusty, like I'm going to the clubs to meet the ladies, and the daughter Audrey, when she's like, I'm going to get so fat eating all the food. I'm like, oh, you will eat all the food, but you won't get fat because it's not as bad for you.
I'm somewhere between Rusty and Audrey.
Well said.
As long as you're not Clark, then we have a fun time.
I'm not Clark, and I personally don't get the whole royals thing. I mean, I was in Europe with my wife and daughter. We went to London, and we went to Buckingham Palace, and just the thousands of people that are there hoping to get a glimpse. And I was more like Audrey, hoping to find some good food.
Good luck.
Okay, so Anthony, I got to ask you the big question here. Our regular comedy expert isn't on the show, but is Chevy Chase funny? This is a question.
I don't think so. I don't find that style of humor funny. I thought the kids were funny, the wife was funny. He was just there.
I agree with you on Beverly D'Angelo. I wrote down that she's the original MILF. Like, she's beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
And
I think she deserved bigger. She deserved a bigger headline. I mean, and more roles, because this is what she's known for. But she had good comedy timing. Her timing was good.
Great.
Her acting was good. Physical comedy was good. Like it worked really well. And she plays the wife, the doting wife, so well that you like feel that she really cares about him. And Chevy Chase, I mean, it's kind of like when they put a big star, and he was a big star at the time, big star in a movie, and sometimes it doesn't blend as well. So I can see what you mean. Like she was definitely the star. And they've done a decent job every time when they because it's been different kids every time.
Yep.
At least in the three main movies that I watched, like they've all worked. You know, I mean Anthony Michael Hall in the first one was cool, you know, and then Galecki or whatever in the Christmas one, like they've all worked. They don't necessarily all look related, but they all worked.
Yeah, I totally agree.
I think he's more of like, he was almost like a shticky character than funny to me.
Yeah.
And then another quick question for the millennials. Do we think Clark Griswold is a good dad or a bad dad?
I mean, back then he was probably a pretty solid dad. Nowadays, no.
Is he?
Yeah, I mean, he took his kids to Europe. Oh, sorry.
He tried.
Sorry, Sean. My bad.
No, it's okay. We all jumped.
You're
in
allowed
here.
to cut me off. The other two, no.
Well, I mean, he tried very hard for his kids, that's for sure. But, I don't know.
It's a bit over his head.
Well, back to the Beverly D'Angelo thing. Like, she could have done better than Clark Griswold. Definitely.
Oh, yeah.
How did he get a wife that hot and that awesome?
You know, people ask me that all the time, so you know it does happen in the real world.
Actually, I get that a lot. Matthew gives me that a lot, our regular Gen X. Okay, Anthony, another check-in with you since you're our expert dog actor. How did this dog do in the movie? Mark, Anthony is our dog actor expert, so every movie that has a dog, he gives us.
You got skills, comedy, Chevy Chase, and dog, dude.
I know we got a really talented cast here.
It's a hell of a resume. It was all right. He's no husky from The Thing, but it was enough.
The husky from The Thing was the best dog of all dog movies. Well, except for Chance, right? From Homeward Bound.
We got to watch that sometime.
We do have to do that sometime. We'll have to go to the next generation past Z for that one.
Better than Air Bud? Come on.
Oh, good point.
Air Bud is good, but still chance. Okay, Mark, another question for you. Traffic circles.
So that one cracked me because I remember watching this, and when I was going to England the first time and I was going to be driving, I was actually kind of worried. One, there is no traffic circle that close to where you're going to be for there, so it's kind of funny. But yeah, no, like that's one of the biggest things that scares people off of actually visiting England. Like, I don't want to drive because the roundabouts, and they get freaked out. And it's true. Like, you can literally just keep going around the circle if you miss your spot. If it's busy, you're not sure how to do it. It really seems like you can't get out. So they do a kind of a nice job. Obviously, it's for the humor. It goes for hours, but yeah, it is doable. And I've seen a lot of tourists like, I don't care, and they'll just cut across and stuff. So yeah, it's a legit thing.
I thought that was hilarious too, and spoiling the trivia for that scene, they actually put him in a traffic circle and filmed him, and they said that the anguish on his face was real because it was a pretty hairy.
If you've never done it before, especially like on the M5 or something like the highways, and you're like, there's a roundabout on the highway, like what? You're like, I don't know what to do.
Well, we're all from Vancouver here, and we just are starting to introduce traffic circles here, and nobody here knows how to work them. They treat it like
Does anybody wrap them?
No, they treat them like four-way stops.
What?
It's unbelievable. Yeah, Sean,
Yeah.
you got to leave the house now and then, buddy.
I'm not in Vancouver. Don't give me that. Don't lump me in with you guys.
He's in Victoria. It's totally different.
We've had traffic circles here for a long time, and while we're bad at them, we're not that bad.
But
my hometown, they were debating putting a traffic circle in by one of the colleges there, and they're like, it will destroy everything. It was like the biggest controversy ever. And we're like, okay, then put a four-way stop. And no, the traffic. I was like, it's just a traffic circle. You'll survive. It's
Modernize.
My favorite is here for fun. One of the first traffic circles they did was for the airport, and they put 3 next to each other in a row. So imagine people trying to learn a traffic circle for the first time, but then there's 3 that connect to each other. It's absolute chaos.
That's evil. Canadians are evil. That proves it right there. Right there. That one Canadian ruined it for all of you.
yeah, we accept that.
We have our problems.
It's true. Okay, let's dive into best parts of this movie. I know we've been talking about our favorite parts, but best parts of this movie. Anybody want to lead off?
The slapping dance. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Sean.
I was just going to say, I mean, it's been referenced a lot, but I love the stealing the camera, the making them take their shoes off and get into the pool. I also love, I don't know if it was intentional or maybe it was just lazy, but I still think it's funny that no one in the crowd reacts to any of it. They're just completely like the oddity of what's happening and no one acknowledges anything. They just sitting there having their conversations.
And I would say that's probably the most thing that's translated as well here, because people don't act like they notice it. They just whip out their phones and record it while they're still doing their own thing. But like, it's still like now people, because now you're like, oh, that's somebody's faking this stuff. That's, it's like, oh, that's a prank. That's a TikTok or whatever. So people just kind of tune it out now. So you're like, but I could see it. It could be today. Just throw out their cameras for like 30 seconds, put it away, go back to their latte.
By the way, on that camera stealing scene, I could have caught that guy.
Well, you are quite fit, my friend.
Clark was not putting the effort in. I mean, I would have been running barefoot down the street. I would have tackled that guy. But
see, if you would have watched Wolters World Travel videos, he would have known. You don't do that.
Yeah.
I think for me, my favorite part, and this one I always go back to, is the slap dancing, the Germany slap dancing thing. Where they're going through it. I'm like, because I've gone to festivals and there's been things like, I mean, not slapping things, but like things like that. And you're like, yeah, but you took it the wrong way, man. But I mean, he was going fine. I'm like, why did he punch him? Just slap him. I think it would have been fine. And then it got kind of crazy. Then when the bells ring and the girl's like, they haven't rung those bells for 100 years. They're going to hang someone. He's like, Dad. I'm like, oh, perfect. And I was like, oh, poor Rusty. He was so close.
Yeah.
He was.
I liked Rusty. Rusty was good. I think the Stonehenge scene, even though I'm not in love with that style of humor, that was really good. Just slowly spirals in.
That was so 80s, man. Like, that's like Mr. Bean.
Yeah.
Like, kind of stuff, like perfectly set up.
I've not been there. Can you actually? You can't get your car that close. There's no way.
No, you
Not
cannot
anymore.
not anymore. Not anymore. Well, here's the thing. I mean, the first time I went, you could walk up and like literally touch the stones. Then I like maybe I don't know. They remodeled it, redid it so that you didn't see the like visitor center and stuff. You have to walk a ways to get to it. Now there's like a thing around it, so you can't go to it. There's only you can't do special tours at night or whatever in the morning to go like up close because they've had people vandalize it now. So they keep people back. So they see somebody going, there's going to be a guard there to stop you and everything. But yeah, back in the day, I mean, I couldn't say for 1984 when they filmed this, but like back in the day, you could literally just walk right up and not with your car though.
No, with your car.
That's
You could maybe your ox cart back in the 1700s. You could have like swiped one, but
I don't know.
That's one thing that has changed for the worst about travel over time because you're making me remember, Mark, that Sagrada Familia in Spain. The first time I went to see that, I could just walk in. Like you just walked in and you could look up and they had a little bit fenced off where they were constructing it. Last time I went last year. And it's completely like you have to pay to get in. It's all fenced off, and you cannot touch anything. It's too bad. I kind of liked the old days that way.
One more thing I really liked about this movie was the tits. They were fantastic.
Nice.
I forgot about the French scene, like the Moulin Rouge stuff. I was like, I forgot about that because I always remember the Rusty scene because that was the funny one. And I think because when we would watch it here, it'd be like on cable TV. And so they'd like fuzz out, like they recut the shot for Rusty's one, but you can't take out that part, the French, dancing scene out, but then because like on cable, they just cut the whole scene out. But it's funny because like that was a really like in the mid '80s, you have like ski school and stuff. There's always be the gratuitous like chest shot everywhere.
You
That was like I saw that. I swear I didn't even remember that part of the movie. And I'm like, and I have the DVD, and I'm like, I forgot about that. There you go.
Yeah, I didn't remember it either. It was a pleasant surprise for sure. Okay, so for best scenes, I had on there. I thought it was actually Nicole, our Gen Z. This was her favorite scene, and I thought it was the best scene in the movie was the car crash in London where he hit the car, and then he starts driving, and 10 seconds later he hits the car, and then he starts driving, and 10 seconds later he hits the guy. And I also have on best parts Eric Idle. Like the guy is just so funny, and the way that he depicted being hit and the blood spurting, and still being kind.
Did you catch the Monty Python reference?
I did.
He's like, it's just a leg.
It's just a leg. I've got another one. Just a flesh wound.
I was like, nice. Monty Python and the Holy Grail reference right there. And we have to realize this: he was still super huge. Because this is mid '80s, Monty Python was still huge at that time. So like that's like getting like, not a Tom Cruise, but like getting like maybe a Will Ferrell or somebody coming in that's like, it like made a little bit past his like peak, but still like famous, coming in and just having like three. Because he had three different cameos basically in there, and it's kind of like,
Here's what time does to you, because I remember distinctly when I watched this movie, I'm like, oh, that's the guy from Monty Python. He's still alive and working. That's great. And here we are 40 years later. And the guy's
still working.
He's still touring, and he looks so young there. I mean, he's way younger than I am now in that movie. Yeah. And I thought he was nearly dead. Oh, sorry, Eric. Okay, on best parts, I got a list here, so I'm going to go through them. Mark, I had traveler's checks. Getting them stolen, having them insured, and being able to get the cash. That's amazing. I don't even know how they worked. It seems inconceivable to me, but I remember them. For Karate Kid fans, I had an appearance by Billy Zabka. I love that guy. By the way, he's never dating that girl, but still, Billy Zabka was great.
Yeah, Jack. They cracked me up. It's like because Cobra Kai here's had like nice. I don't know in Canada if he had nice comeback, but on their Cobra Kai series just wrapped up. So it's like perfect little thing here.
He's my hero. He's my hero. I had best parts perverted game show hosts, and my note is that I miss Richard Dawson.
Yeah, I had the same note. Richard Dawson reference. Very uncomfortable start to the movie, but.
And then, Anthony, I have to ask you this one because you were on the Xanadu episode. So I said, I like the shopping montage in Italy. I always like I think we all here enjoy a good shopping montage. Was this better or worse than the Xanadu shopping montage?
I think it was worse. Xanadu was top class.
Xanadu was the best. I agree. And Mark, here's a good one for best parts. Attempting to speak the language. What are your thoughts?
Well, this is the one that I thought wasn't very right because, like in Paris, if you at least try, people are like they know right away you don't speak French, but at least you're trying. So like they'll be. I mean, it really changes things. Like I tell people all the time, you go to France, just say bonjour when you walk into a store, restaurant, anything. You're 100% going to get treated better because you at least tried, and you don't speak anything else. And I've seen waiters in Paris just fawn over like Japanese tourists, just saying like bonjour, and they don't know anything else. They don't know, and they'll find a way to communicate. And that was the thing because he was just like ripping them for like such bad French. I'm like that maybe back in the day, but not now. That was one thing. I think he would have done better with his service because he at least was trying. Though his translator thing, I'm like, we didn't really get much farther than that for like 30 or 40 years until Google's like Lens came out and you could change it. I'm like, wow, he didn't really go very far for a long time. For like 20 years, that was like the best thing to have, a little Berlitz like little typewriter thing.
Speaking of the translator in London, when he says, "Dad," he's speaking English.
That guy was harder to understand than the French waiter for sure.
Oh yeah, and that happened. Okay, that's real though, because you go parts like northern England, and you go up to Scotland, northern Scotland. Like you're like, what? You're like, I must make eye contact and really pay attention to like get all the English because that does happen.
Mark, I've got Canadian friends that have lived in Canada for 40 years but came from the UK, and I can't understand them today. So
I always find that interesting because my mother's British, so I grew up with it. I've watched lots of British shows. And I always remember watching, I think it was Broadchurch with my wife, and she was struggling so much with the accents. And I'm like, wait, they have accents? What's going on? Didn't even...
Okay, one more best part before we move on, and I'm going to say family pride. One thing you got to give Clark Griswold is family pride, right? I love that.
Yeah, he was all about his family, and that's the thing. Is like his goal is for his family to like win. Like in the first one, second one, the Christmas one, it was all like that's what the fourth one didn't really do it, but like those first three ones, like he was always like, I want to do it for my family. The pool for Christmas vacation was for his family. This was like, I want my family to see Europe, so we have something. Remember, in the '80s, like this is your once in a lifetime opportunity kind of thing. You know, be like, we're going to take a mission to Mars. Like that's almost how crazy it was back then to take your kids there, and and Wally World, it was like he really wanted his family to have something, and that I respect. And being a father, like the part where everyone was getting on everybody's nerves, like that was the most realistic part of traveling for 2 weeks with anybody. Your best friend, your family, your girlfriend, your wife. You get that time to like, I hate how you chew. I hate the noise you make. Like you have that. So when they're there and she's crinkling the paper and
I love that
snapping her gum, he's listening. I mean, that is 100%. Like anybody does their backpack in Europe thing, like you got your buddy. That's what I always tell people. Like, yo, once a week, like once every week, you need to have a day where you don't hang out with each other at all. Like you may want not what you want, but just take it because you're gonna hate each other at the end. Because I've seen so many like people like we travel and we'll meet like people by themselves. Like, oh, you travel by yourself? No, I started with my friend or I started with my girlfriend, and they break up during the thing. I'm like, yeah, because you spent too much time together.
Okay. Any other best parts before I move it to worst?
I think we touched on them all for me.
Okay, I'll lead it off for worst parts. Now we know they changed the actors for the kids in every version of this movie, but I didn't really love the Audrey character. I called it out as worst.
Yeah, it was kind of an interesting one. Interesting choice.
I feel like at that time she was not super well known, but she was well known enough. Like she was a recognizable face because she was in other things. And at that, because I remember back thinking the same thing, like didn't quite fit, but she was kind of known. So maybe it was kind of like it was somebody that was known. Is why they put her in there. I don't know, but you're right. It didn't. She wasn't the best, but she did grow on me over the movie, kind of thing. Especially after like she was kind of done with Jack, and she kind of be her own thing and not just base everything off of Jack. So,
other worst parts. I didn't really like the dream sequences, and in particular the royals. Now, Prince Charles actually looked right, or at least he looked funny, but the Lady Di did not look anything like her.
Mm-hmm.
It was terrible.
Yeah, for that one, I can understand that kind of things, but for me, from the travel expert side of it, that is exactly people going for their first trip to Europe. Like, you understand how many people have those conversations with me before they go, and I'm like, let's just temper your expectations. It's like, you never want to meet your heroes. Like, just be ready. Just be ready. So, but that was a realistic one. But yeah, it was. But it was, sometimes you can see when they have scenes where like we need to fill up time.
Yeah.
Like, and you can see how movies have changed over the years. How the cuts are quicker, the pauses aren't as long to kind of have that. Oh, and then like let's watch the family walk off the screen together. Whereas now, like the end, like now you'd have that scene with kind of like, oh, the last word happens, and now we're cutting to the new scene instead of, oh, we had our last words, we walk off the stage, and then it comes on.
Yeah.
Like it is very different editing these days, and how the cinematography is too.
And I think they've learned a lot. We're big fans on this podcast of comedies that are 90 minutes. Like everybody on this cast tends to believe that a comedy is good when it's a tight 90 minutes. They could have trimmed this movie down a little bit for sure.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's at least 3 or 4 minutes of just dead air you probably could cut out.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I felt it. I didn't have a lot of bad scenes per se. A lot of the humor I wasn't a fan of, just the style of it. And I agree, a lot of stuff it was a 90-minute movie, but it felt way longer to me.
I don't know if I'm an impatient millennial filling in the cliche, but I think that was my wow, rude. I think
I thought it was a question. Sorry.
I never want your input.
Okay.
No, but the transitions I feel like that's why it felt slow. A lot of leeway into the jokes, a lot of leeway out.
They could probably do a re-edit of it today and tighten it up.
Oh, for sure.
The other worst part I had was the ending, and again, some trivia that I found on this is that they had a different ending. They had an ending where they flew home and that their house had been broken into. And in test audiences hated that ending, so they quickly went back and reshot the ending on the airplane, and that was to me not great. Knocking over the Statue of Liberty's torch, that took it to a completely different style of movie. It was not good.
I almost felt like it was perfect ending, like for just the way it was building up, and then something so stupid at the end. I was like, yeah, it's perfect send off.
Well, the thing is that the stupid thing at the end was kind of how national. That's more National Lampoon's, almost Mad Magazine kind of stuff, like that ending where it falls over. That was one of those, because it does really feel like a disjointed ending. And it's like when you see movies now, and like, oh, we got to change the ending real quick, and it's kind of like like was it X-Men 2 where Wolverine's hair is different? You're like, all right, you didn't edit it the right way. You didn't have the things there. Like you can tell this was a reshoot. Like that didn't quite fit for me. What I didn't like the like Clark being the dad that he is, watching the other movies, he would have I feel like he would have not gone and done all the stuff by himself. He would have done his reflect. He never had a reflection. Like he never had the come to Jesus moment where it's like, oh, third act, I realized I was a douchebag and I need to do better, and apologize to my family. No, it's just like he just happens to come back when Audrey's running out, going after her mom. Like, we gotta go get her. You're like, I feel like there could have been something there where he has a better fatherly moment. I mean, as a dad, that's one of those things you mess up because you're so focused on, oh, we got to see these things, and you kind of go, oh wait, and he's a caring father and a caring, but more relatively caring husband, And so I think that didn't quite fit for me. I don't think if I wasn't a dad, I probably wouldn't have noticed as much. I probably would have said yeah, he was a kind of a jerk dad. Like that would have been mine. But now that I see all the stuff dads go through, I can see kind of the things in there. But yeah, that the ending and then just the too quick coming to Jesus for we threw in that third act, kidnapping. It's like, what?
Well, okay, I will say, building on what you said about Clark, I was hard on him for not chasing down the guy that stole his camera, but he was willing to hop on a bicycle and chase a mobster to save his wife. So he's not a chicken shit.
No, and that did show him he does care. That's the Chevy Chase when he did some of his comedies. That was the thing, was he would show the physicalness, not just the physical comedies, but his physicalness as well, because he's a big dude. He's 6'2", 6'3", or something like that. He's a big guy.
Yeah, I think we respect a guy that's willing to trade punches with Germans, right?
Many times.
Exactly.
Okay, we need to move it along here, but any lines you guys want to call out? personally, very simple line, but I love it. On the plane on the way over, when the stewardess, he says, "Can I have a Coke?" And she says, "You want it in the can?" And he says, "No, I'll take it here." That's good comedy.
So I like how he looks back at the toilets. He's like, "Huh?"
It was well done.
Like he had good dad jokes. He had good dad jokes.
I liked the scene where they were at the German table, and they're handing out the sausages, and they pass it to the wife, and the daughter is like, "Oh, I miss Jack."
I didn't notice that one. That's
Yeah.
great.
And then there was
That was pretty. That one was pretty good.
and then the same kind of scene there when they leave the German house, and then the wife looks at the husband. Who the hell were those people?
Yeah. Well, which is funny. Like I speak German, and the grandpa speaking like with the cuss words and stuff that was there. But when the grandma says it, she's just like, "Who was that?" Like she's not like "Verdammt, wer war diese Arschlöcher?" Like which is like, "Damn, who the hell are these idiot assholes?" You know, like. But his part, the old man's was, but the grandma's wasn't, which was kind of funny. So they made it a little more enticing. And I wonder with the French scenes as well if they were as naughty in French as the translation was.
I loved all those translation scenes. I'm a sucker for that kind of humor.
Okay, well, let's find out how this movie did. You guys think it was successful?
Yes.
I would say it was probably maybe a top like number 25 or 26 in box office of 1985.
Okay, well, according to Box Office Mojo Worldwide, European Vacation was the 14th highest earning movie at the box office in 1985.
That's a hit.
Out of Africa was the leader at the box office in 1985, and this film was beaten by two older Pure Gold favorites, Cocoon. Oof, Cocoon did not age well, Mark. It was also beat by other two older Pure Gold movies, Witness and Goonies, both great movies. Chevy Chase also beat himself with Fletch.
Yeah, Fletch a classic.
This was obviously a big year for Chevy. This was when he was huge. But the craziest part, in 1985, according to Box Office Mojo, European Vacation beat The Breakfast Club.
Wow.
I can believe that.
That surprised
Because
me.
European Vacation had a bigger audience base because Breakfast Club was geared towards high school kids. And though high school kids go to movies a lot, you remember you got to have the four quadrants to have a huge, outcome. And they're basically going for the younger audience, and it just didn't materialize. It became a bigger classic, of course, than that. But there's a lot of times you have movies that were bigger, made more money, but weren't classic films, and vice versa.
Well, we'll get a load of this. I mean, we're all movie fans here, so it also beat. I'm going to give you a list, and I was surprised by all of these. It beat Pale Rider, which we've done on this show.
What?
It beat Commando. It beat St. Elmo's Fire, Teen Wolf, and Silverado.
Beat Teen Wolf? Wow, I wouldn't have guessed that one.
I wouldn't have guessed any of those. I would have guessed all of those movies would have beat this one, but there you go. I mean, that just shows you the power.
Chevy Chase was a big. I mean, he was a movie star at that time.
It was huge.
I think I agree with Mark. It's probably one of those things where in the year it did better, but I bet if you went 10 years down the line and you looked at all those movies, they all had more views. And
correct.
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely
put
right.
in the DVD sales, the Netflix hours, and that's one thing I think would be interesting to kind of go back because you know how like they rank on how much money did it make? Well, let's figure out how many actors were sold, adjust for inflation, but then let's put in the new numbers. It's kind of like when they changed like the song stuff to move to the sound scan, where it was like, oh no, it's just like not what people say, but actually the barcodes. And now it's like, oh, now we have to factor in the downloads and the streaming. Like, I think that would be very interesting. Is like what worked? Because think about movies like Shawshank Redemption, a movie that was literally a complete bomb
Yep.
when it came out, and now is one of the people recognize one of the greatest movies ever made.
I did not know
I
that.
mean, no
movie
offense
bombed.
if you guys
Well,
don't think so, but you're wrong
No.
if you don't.
It is, and I think most people think that's the best movie ever made. But no, it's really interesting. This is why we do this podcast. And what I love about this podcast, well, there's two things. One is that we dig up these movies we loved as kids, and sometimes we like, oof, I like that as a kid. So hilarious. And then the other thing is just to check with our millennials, like, does this movie fly today? Because tastes change, styles change.
Oh yeah, and that's what I think is cool about your podcast because you guys go through that and you actually have the discussion about why doesn't it work now. Like that's why it's cool to have the different things because tastes have changed, and I think it's also good for us elderly people to watch again. We reminisce back. You're like, was it really that good? Like Goonies is still a good movie. I like watching it with my kids. Skeleton Crew was a really good Goonies Star Wars. Like I thought it was like a nice little thing. But then there's other movies you watch again, you're like, and no, like that did not that it didn't just age well. It's just like that's just not funny anymore.
We also have a section in this podcast, Mark, we call Woke or Joke, where we talk about things that have not aged well. Because, gratuitous boobies, I miss that from the 80s, but that doesn't really fly anymore. Game show hosts.
Making out with underage daughters.
Making out with underage girls. This
is on Saturday Night Live.
Times change. Anyhow, I'm going to take us back to the rankings. So, clearly there was a lot of competition at the box office. This movie did just fine. In the rankings, Out of Africa was the best Oscar winner this year, Best Picture Oscar winner. And I can tell you I didn't laugh once in Out of Africa. So, whatever that tells you. The budget for this movie was $17 million. Who wants to guess what it made?
You said 7-0?
1-7.
Oh,
1-7.
It cost $17 million to make?
Domestic or worldwide?
Worldwide.
Why does it cost so much?
7. I was gonna go like in the 30s, but since it was like the 14th ranked movie, I'm gonna go 70 million, 75 million.
I think 52.
I'm gonna go 60. Split the difference.
Anthony's getting good at this. 49 million. Movies did not do the huge numbers in those days that they do today. So, okay. So this is my favorite part of the podcast is Rotten Tomatoes. So, Mark, we like to guess out of 100, and remember it's contemporaneous, right? What do critics think of this movie out of 100, and what does the audience think?
I want to say the audience was probably in the 80s, and then the critics probably had it in the 40s. Because I always feel that Rotten Tomatoes really is horrible with comedies, and anything that normal people find like funny, they're like, "Oh, that's below us," and so it must not be good.
Yeah,
I guess they talk just like that on IMDb, right?
You're right. Critics usually are hard on comedies, and audience usually love them. But where did we end up here? Okay, Anthony, take a shot at this.
I'm gonna say 55 for the critics and 73 for the audience.
Okay.
I'm going to go 58 for the critics and 62 for the audience.
Ooh, I'm not liking that one. Wasn't that bad.
Okay, so 37. So, Mark, you weren't far off with your 40. 37% of critics said get out and see this movie. So, you guys were all kind of close on that. Audience. Sean, you were the closest. 49%. Less than half of people that watched this movie said it's okay. Because remember, Rotten Tomatoes isn't saying if it's a 49% doesn't say it's a 5 out of 10 movie. It says 5 out of 10 people said go ahead and give it a watch.
That makes sense.
I guess purely from I had never heard of this movie before you asked me to watch it.
And that's a good point because like if people, even older movies. If people ask, like, hey, is there anything that I haven't seen for a while? Like, check it out on Max, or HBO Max or whatever. Like, okay, that could be something. But yeah, like that's true because this is definitely the one. I wonder what the scores are for the other in the series. Like that would be something to kind of compare. If this is like the lowest one, because this one no one ever talks about.
I think. Well, let me tell you this. According to Rotten Tomatoes, this is the third best movie in the series. The original at number 1, and the remake last.
Yeah.
Okay. And the original Vacation was Chevy Chase's best movie, according to Rotten Tomatoes. And Fletch, Caddyshack, and Christmas Vacation, and Three Amigos were all rated higher than this. So, okay, I got some movie trivia for you guys. So, interestingly enough, this film knocked Back to the Future off the top spot, which it had held for 3 weeks. So Back to the Future only in the theater 3 weeks, and then this knocked it off. Again, amazing the power this franchise had in the day that I don't think it holds today. Anthony Michael Hall, who was Rusty in the original, decided to make Weird Science instead of reprising his role as Rusty. And Weird Science was episode 1 for Too Old to Pure Gold.
And fun fact, I love Weird Science. That was one of my favorite movies when I was a kid.
Yeah. It held up. It was great. Everybody loved it when we did the episode. And the other thing, they used different actors for the kids in every instance of the movie, but There's some people out there say there's actually a Griswold curse for the actors that play the kids because they all had, they not great careers, or the girl that played Audrey in this one died very young. So it's a rumor.
Oh, I didn't know that. But I'm like, I know Juliette Lewis, she did okay. Michael Hall, he had a comeback sort of. And then Galecki, I mean, I would have loved to have a horrible career like his on Big Bang Theory.
Anthony Michael Hall, I'm watching Jack Reacher season 3. He's the bad guy in that.
Yeah, he's in it. Yeah, it's funny how he's come up with a few things. Because there was one like we could not see dead people. Or something. He had a series for like a few seasons on USA in the US, like in the early 2000s. I was like, oh, cool, because Weird Science and Vacation and
Breakfast Club
16. Breakfast Club, 16 Candles. Like, I liked him back then when I was a kid, and he like just kind of. I'm like, dude, he stopped making, because I was a kid, I didn't know. I was like, he stopped making movies. Like, no, I just didn't get casted. And then he came back 20 years later, had something, and disappeared for another 10 years, and now he's back.
Yeah, it's like Molly Ringwald. She was huge in those days, and then she didn't do a lot. She does stuff, but she just didn't translate it to modern days.
Yeah.
Okay, along with Caddyshack 2 and Nothing But Trouble, this is one of the few films Chevy Chase regrets making.
Wow.
I can understand Caddyshack 2 for sure.
In the scene where Clark is by himself outside the ruins in Rome, he takes his glasses off, puts the camera up, and takes a selfie. And the trivia says this is maybe one of the earliest selfies ever seen in a movie.
I totally was expecting someone to steal his camera when he did that too.
And this is the only vacation film in which Cousin Eddie doesn't appear. And for you guys that don't know the franchise, that doesn't mean anything, but for Mark and me, it does.
I am devastated.
And I think... Okay, quiet you. Somebody mute his mic.
He's been drinking.
I think it does hurt it, Mark. What do you think? Cousin Eddie's such a great character.
I think now it does. At the time, I don't think people were really thinking about it, or like nowadays you would have put like a post-credit scene to just add him in, like how they added like Iron Man into the first Hulk movie just to give something, because now he's such a part of it. Like you have to somehow get him in.
You could have just made a cameo. You could have just had him run into him at one of the cafes or something, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Have his RV parked at Stonehenge. Emptying
or,
his shit.
or it's something like, hey, thanks for dropping us off at the airport. Like you could have, like they could have made it up. Or hey, it would have been a better refilmed ending if like Cousin Eddie would have picked him up at the airport and then it like foreshadows a future episode. You know what I mean?
Yeah, agreed. Okay, so Mark, this section we call Woke or Joke. We just like to touch on anything in these movies that didn't really age well, is maybe a bit cringeworthy. And I think we already mentioned game show hosts molesting teenage girls.
Yeah, that's not cool.
Again, I miss Richard Dawson.
Running Man. There's one for you. Watch the Arnold Schwarzenegger Running Man with him.
Yeah.
Oh, we did.
We did that episode, and we're all huge fans. He was so good in that. And then Nicole, our Gen Z, who is usually our watchdog for Woke or Joke.
Societal issues.
She did watch this movie with me, and she passed along her thoughts on Woke or Joke. She doesn't like the part where Billy says, she eats too much, I like her skinny.
Yeah, I heard that. I was like, that doesn't fly anymore.
She doesn't really like the fat shaming.
I like...
there was people realize there was a lot. I mean, I'm a fat guy, and I remember when I was a kid, I was a fat kid too. But there was a lot of fat shaming back then, a lot of ugly shaming. There's a lot of movies where like, oh, why don't you wear this bag on your head kind of stuff, you know?
One of my favorite parts when I watch these movies now is I see certain things and I'm like, I wonder how Nicole's going to react to that. And that's kind of like, I enjoy those parts of the movie. See her take.
Agreed. I don't know why I wrote this down. I also had attempted rape by a mobster.
Oh, yeah.
That's a bit of a faux pas.
Okay. Well, let's talk about reviews. So however you guys felt about this movie, I promise you there's others who liked it more or less than you. And for this movie, there were 11 10-star reviews out of 159 total reviews. So not great. So I'm not feeling this is going to end up in the classic movie category, but here we go. I don't understand why people don't like this movie. Chevy Chase is there. Beverly D'Angelo is there. Eric Idle is there, which is great. Sure, I'd rather see Anthony Michael Hall than Jason Lively, but Lively does a decent job. I don't care if people hate this movie. I'm sticking by my beliefs, and I say this movie is great. Okay, that's fair. Another one. Frankly, these movies have some of the funniest humor I've ever seen in a comedy. Scene after scene, I was laughing my ass off. Chevy Chase is still one of the best comedians of the 80s, and he never disappoints as an obsessed father focused on giving his family the best vacation ever, but he fails every time.
From someone who hasn't seen any Monty Python.
Good point. And one more 10-star. I like how in each vacation the kids change. I gotta say, in this particular outing, the kids are ugly. There we go, ugly shaming. A teenage girl who looks like she's a 47-year-old gremlin and the ugliest, squish-faced, whiny-voiced Rusty ever. I suggest watching this stoned on mushrooms and drinking your dad's Smirnoff Ice. It will help boost the ratings. That was a 10-star review.
Dude, that was
definitely drinking his dad's Smirnoff Ice.
That was brutal.
Okay, and now we hear from people who liked it less. There were only 8 one-star reviews compared to the 11 10-star reviews. And, Mark, I think we got a professor here. Mr. Six summarizes for us. What have we learned from this vacation? That the English are lazy and oversexed, that the French are rude to Americans, that Germans will let anyone into their homes and get into slap fights, the Italians smuggle stolen goods using unwitting Americans, and have very lax driving laws. Okay.
Pretty accurate.
And Ron Sasso...
I can see how you could get that. I could see how you get that with this movie.
And Ron Sasso says, it's been a long time since I watched European Vacation, and I had decided it was time to give it another try. I remember a funny scene with Eric Idle from Monty Python. What I didn't remember is that it's the only funny scene in the movie. The characters were flat.
You thought snarky was a new thing.
The characters were flat compared to the other vacation movies. The plot was thin. I will likely use this DVD as a coaster or attempt to sell it at a garage sale. It's not worth wasting 90 minutes to watch it. If you want to see a funny scene with Eric Idle, watch Monty Python. It's much funnier. Oh, Sean, did you write this one?
No.
And then one last one, which is simple and to the point. Stick with the Christmas one. You'll be all right.
So when are we doing the Christmas one?
At Christmas, Sean. Try to keep up.
Walked into that one, buddy.
I did.
Invite me back because I've actually spent the night. I spent a few nights in the actual Christmas Story house. If you haven't done that one for a Christmas one,
okay.
I'm a huge fan. I have the leg lamp in my front window of my house.
Okay, you are coming back for the Christmas episode then.
I might not be. I might be a little biased though. I won't warn you. I will warn you.
Okay.
We like biases here.
We like bias. And usually we like to consult Siskel and Ebert, but this is the first time in 40 episodes I've been skunked by Siskel and Ebert. I couldn't find their review of this movie anywhere. But for the record, Leonard Maltin gave it 2 out of 4, whatever that tells us.
Yeah, fits with the rating thing on Rotten Tomatoes.
So the next question is, does this movie deserve a remake, prequel, or sequel? And of course, we know that this is a franchise. So I'll just tell you, Eric Idle and Chevy Chase became good friends after working on this film, and they worked on a follow-up called National Lampoon's Australian Vacation. But aside from a few shark jokes, neither could come up with much, and they abandoned the project. In this series, we know we have Vacation was the original 1983, then this one, then Christmas Vacation in 1989, Vegas Vacation. Now, that's my history with this franchise. But then, Mark, as you pointed out, Christmas Vacation 2 in 2003. There's one called Hotel Hell Vacation 2010, which I've never heard of. And then there's the remake Vacation in 2015 with Ed Helms and Christina Applegate, which it had some funny moments, but it did not hold up as far as I'm concerned.
I do feel like this concept could be done into a funny movie. I don't know that you necessarily need a remake, but like travel has changed, the world has changed. I think you could do some funny stuff with modern travel. It'd be a lot more people walking around with cameras filming themselves constantly, but
there'd be a lot more people walking around, like
that too.
Tours and stuff. Like I would love to see Chevy Chase deal with Ryanair.
Yeah, his plane was pretty nice. Those seats, they
that
looked
was like
Looked like a private jet. It was so small.
Yeah, I don't. He's not getting in the cockpit anymore.
Oh, that also.
That one did not age well. Like I'm like, ooh, that was.
I guess it was a little too easy.
That was hilarious. Okay, and the conclusion for this podcast, I need to ask everybody here: is this movie too old or is it pure gold?
Pure gold. I'm glad I watched it again. I appreciate you guys having me put it back in the DVD player. I think I even have the VHS somewhere in the basement.
To me, it's too old. It was a good ride, but it was too old.
I'm in the too old camp as well.
Yeah.
Millennials.
We're the worst generation.
No. This is one thing. When I teach marketing, one of the things I always laugh is how boomers and millennials like get so mad at each other. But what you have to realize is boomers and millennials are actually very similar in terms of like their focus and what they're wanting to do, and they have. It's kind of like when they're too close and similar. When you're too similar, then you fight even more. And that's one thing that always cracks me up. Like I always get upset when people would rip on millennials. I'm like, no, think about it. They grew up doing 19 different things, so they know about multitasking because they were doing like ballet, violin, and swim practice all on Monday, and then Tuesday was taekwondo. Like that's why they can have their phone going, their computer going, and film a podcast all at the same time.
That's a good point.
I'm the last vote here. I'm gonna call it pure gold. It's a little bit on the fence for me, but I did, especially the first half and those car crash scenes and Eric Idle and like the German gags. Like there was a lot of stuff that made me laugh. So I'm gonna call it pure gold. And we're at the end of the podcast, but Mark, I said I did have a couple of travel questions I thought our audience would love to hear from you, and I'm curious. Sure. Question number one, how many countries have you visited? Because I know you got a ton of videos out there. And then what's the one that you're most interested to see out of the ones you haven't seen?
So I'm about 80 countries right now where I filmed in. And then the country I want to go to the most I haven't gone to, because every time I try to book something happens, is Egypt. That would be the one that I haven't got to yet that I want to go to. And there's like 3 different trips I was booked for, and things happen in the world. And so they get pushed back. So that's the one I want to go to the most that I haven't been to yet.
Okay. And then for our Gen Z and millennial listeners who may not have started on their traveling adventures, what do you think is a good recommendation for a good first go-to trip?
So what I tell people, if you want to do internet, well, there's different things. Like one thing, if you want to go see your family history, wherever your family, like because if you're from Canada and the U.S., you're most likely not a Native American or First Nations. Like your family's from someplace else. I always tell like that can be a really good experience when you want to go and see. Like I remember the first time I went to Germany. And my grandma was from Germany back in the day. I'm like, oh my God, this is like grandma's noodles. And this is like, the buildings look like the town I lived in. Because I lived in a German town that had a German historic district. I was like, my goodness. It was like, now I understand where Opa was from, I think having that experience, whether you're going to China, you're going to like, Spain, or you're going to South Africa. I mean, it's really like hits you in your heart. Like it's a really great experience culturally and like for your own family goodness. But I think if you're looking for, I just want to go on a vacation. I want to go to Europe for the first time. I usually recommend people going to Ireland because it's an island, and if you never get lost because you hit the coast, you'll find your way out. People are super friendly. They're used to like tourists like not knowing how to drive, so they're very like understanding, like in the movie. If you're not sure where to go, so that's kind of cool. And they have some of the best sense of humor, so they're gonna like totally rip you a new one, but in a funny way. So you're like, works out really well. So that's one of the ones I usually recommend for like a first time abroad, because so many people are scared about language differences and stuff that's like an super easy go-to one. And it's super cheap to get to. Not cheap to be there, but to get to.
We saw how the French waiters treat people, so yeah, I get that.
Yeah.
Okay, that's great. Mark, we are really, really thrilled to have you on this podcast. You were a lot of fun. You're the right guy to help us break down European vacation. Glad you could validate some of the facts in this documentary.
Well, I appreciate you reaching out. Thank you, guys.
And we'll invite you back for Christmas. We'll see you at Christmas.
Sounds good.
Oh, and do you have a plug? Where can listeners find you?
Yeah, if you want to find me, look at Wolters World, WOLTERS World, on Twitter, Facebook, X, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest. But the big place you're going to find us is YouTube. If you don't know how to look for it, just say the don'ts of going to put some country around the world. You'll probably see a round, bald head with a beard offering you travel advice that's going to be honest and forthcoming to make sure you have the best time when you go abroad.
Fantastic. Got one right here. We're doing Japan. That's my next one.
There you go. Don't visit China. There you go.
Oh,
thanks, man.
Just before coming down here to record this, just for fun, I looked up your Vancouver one. I've seen it before, but it was fun. 6 years ago.
I'm glad. Yeah, I need to get back. I need to take the kids. They haven't been out. They haven't been to the West Coast. My wife and I are going to. We're going to Banff and Calgary in the summer when the kids are doing stuff. But I got to get the kids to the West Coast.
Cool. Okay. Thanks, Mark. This was great.
Thank you.
Really
Bye,
appreciate
y'all.
it.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, guys.
See you guys.